Tracy, Tom, thank you so much for coming on the show today to talk about something really important right now, which is science communication, and specifically science communication within this big organization that covers so much science here in the United States, and that's NOAA. And, part of what I think is frustrating is sometimes, at least in my world, you still have to say the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, like when we're putting it on the news. So I think the goal here is for everybody to know what NOAA is and have it be a household name. So I'm so glad to have both of you on today because you're both former NOAA employees. So we can get a little inside scoop on how things go within the agency and then also best practices moving forward when it comes to science communication. So I want to introduce both of you and let you give a little introduction of yourself too. Let's start with Dr. Tracy Fanara. You are recently departed from NOAA, but can you take me back and tell me what your background is and then also what your role was with NOAA?
Yeah, so I'm an environmental engineer and research scientist. I have a pretty multidisciplinary, but communication has always been a big part throughout my entire career so far. I ran a research lab. I was in academia. The research lab was a nonprofit, and then I went to government. I worked for both USGS and then for NOAA, managing the coastal and ocean modeling. So everything from the bottom of the ocean all the way to storm surge. That includes harmful algae blooms and oil spills, search and rescue, things like that.
That was your NOAA position, but then you have this whole other world that you work in. Explain Inspector Planet to all of us.
Inspector Planet is really a combination of Captain Planet and Inspector Gadget. It's an innovation in sustainability. With entropy, we really can't have true sustainability without innovating in a changing world. And so my mission has been focused on getting people more involved with science. I've had even at Mote Marine Laboratory, where I was before NOAA, had a big focus on citizen science or community science, getting the public to actually contribute to scientific data so that they can understand the scientific process. I run a couple of kids camps focused on watershed hydrology, engineering, design, and building. I think it's really important that kids can build, especially young girls. And then I do a lot of TV shows, and I'm an expert for the Weather Channel, Fox Weather, and a number of other networks.
Yes, we've seen your face pop up in a lot of different places, in addition to being just great on social media. Awesome person to follow for all sorts of science information. All right. And then, Tom, I want to talk to you as well. Another recent departure from NOAA, but you're very much on the climate side of things, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I started at NOAA as a contractor, as a forecaster, actually, in the Weather Service at the Climate Prediction Center. And then I slowly realized that while I found doing the science really, really rewarding, I liked talking about it more. So I slowly transitioned from the National Weather Service, and I became the climate scientist at climate.gov. So I wrote a ton of their articles, I ran their social media, and then I started working at NOAA's Office of Communications at their headquarters, helping with the broader strategy of how NOAA communicates all the work that it does, especially as it relates to climate. My one foot still in the science world was that I was one of the ENSO forecasters at NOAA and writer for the ENSO blogs. Whenever we said El Nino or La Nina is here, that's all my fault, or at least partly my fault. And then, I do some other things that I somehow convinced people at NOAA to let me do as it relates to science communication. Somehow got NOAA to let me make a cartoon series called Teak and Tom Explore Planet Earth. It's NOAA's first ever animated series. I still don't know how and why, but hey, I wasn't going to ask questions. It's for 4th to 6th graders, and it's kind of exploring how the oceans and the atmosphere work together to create this kind of crazy world that we live in.
It's so interesting to me because both of you and myself all have science backgrounds, but then fell into this world of communication. Do you feel like most of the time it's the opposite, that science communicators kind of started with this like communications background, and then at least most of the PR people that I've worked with in the past, especially with NOAA, have not been people with science backgrounds, they've been communicators. So you think that's like a new trend?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a new trend because I think you're right. I feel like a lot of the folks who I work with were science curious, but they were more on the communications, public affairs side of things, and who kind of came into NOAA. And then got all nerdy with the rest of us scientists.
Mhm.
And I feel
Yeah.
like nowadays there is more of a trend of scientists kind of moving into the comms world, which I think it's a good thing. I think it helps. One, sometimes it makes the scientists feel more comfortable in telling their stories if they know that you're a scientist for whatever reason. But it's good to have kind of folks go in both directions, especially when you're talking about complicated things like the atmosphere and the ocean.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this episode was kind of prompted by something that I saw Tracy put on LinkedIn. So I kind of want to explain the background on that and Tracy, get your deeper thoughts on what you had written there, because you talked about departing from NOAA in order to better communicate all of the amazing things that NOAA does. And the thing that really stood out to me that struck a chord was when you mentioned how you want kids to go home with NOAA shirts and be proud of, like that. And I think about NASA and how kids are wearing NASA shirts everywhere. They're sold in Old Navy. So why isn't that NOAA? Why are we not walking around with NOAA shirts? Why do we still have to say the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to explain to people what NOAA is?
I mean, I'm sure that there are a number of different reasons for that, and I mean, there's actual data-driven reasons, right? We don't have a marketing budget that NASA does. There we don't have the personnel that NASA does when it comes to outreach and communications. But I also think that a lot of the reason is just the historic, I don't know how to say this, how scientists are and how they view communication. And it was really tough in my position because it's like the scientists don't think you're a real scientist because you're on TV. And then the people on TV are like, "Oh, well, she's not a TV person; she's a scientist." And it's just this thing where you never fit in anywhere. But my experience, especially I know, and this isn't the same throughout. Like there are so many different offices that were so supportive of communication. Other offices, people in other offices were supportive of my communication even. But, like we have a very, very important mission. It's a lot of military personnel, a lot of bureaucrats that have been there for decades and have never really communicated science or thought it was important. That was kind of the area that I was in. So it was really hard for me because even when I would communicate on the weekends or days off, like it would be like kind of held against me, which wasn't cool. And that's not the way that it is throughout NOAA. It's absolutely not. It was just my experience, and I just wasn't in the right place. And I have to, Tom, I have to tell you that your Enzo blog, if you've been the one doing that, I think I emailed who I thought did the Enzo blog and I wrote them to tell them how great it was because it is a fantastic visuals, written wise. Like it was so easy for me to use that. I had a whole camp focused on Enzo for kids. It was still too big of I won't do that again. However, it was really helpful what you did.
I want to know how you marketed that camp. I,
Yeah,
I don't know that I would get any takers.
yeah. I mean, DoD. Well, here's the thing: they were building. It was a STEM camp. They were building tools. They were building buoys, drones, ROVs. They were building all these things to actually investigate. So what I was trying to have the kids do is investigate their surroundings to figure out how Enzo is going to impact red tide and manatees. It was too big for 5 days. Like I'm gonna, like that was a lesson learned, but real easy to my focus on it, like the parents wanted them to use the tool, build the tools, use the tools, but my focus is always that they are just tools to discover science.
Gotcha. Okay. So, Tom, you were on this whole other side of thing too, because I have actually done interviews with you as you were a spokesperson for NOAA. And I often interview people from NOAA all the time, actually, and from NASA. And sometimes I get frustrated with the scripted response. So, I want to know from your side of things how scripted it actually is, what the media prep process is like. I want to know everything that goes on from that side.
It's really dependent on who is doing who's being interviewed. I don't script anything. I don't like coming across as scripted, so I just kind of like to, well, I know the topic of what you're going to talk about, and I just, let my knowledge take over and see where it goes. But I am a weird scientist in that I never have stage fright about anything. It's a gift, for better or for worse. But I do know there are scientists who are very nervous about it. And part of my thing, I've done a lot of interviews, and the reason I started doing interviews on ENSO was because no one else really wanted to. They got into the field because they just wanted to make the forecast and do the science, not necessarily talk to anybody. And I said I would do it because I felt like it was important enough to talk about. But I've kind of made it a mission of mine when I was at NOAA to get scientists to realize that it's not adversarial when you're talking to the media about what you're doing, but because they're so nervous, they tend to write things out. And sometimes, yes, you can literally feel like you're reading every line that they're saying. Now, that's pretty much what they did themselves. It's not like anyone at NOAA wrote something down for them, but you do sometimes tend to see that. And the one thing I always tell folks scientists who are doing interviews is to recognize, like, you have all the power because they're asking you a question. So you can answer it however you'd want to necessarily answer it. So, and it's okay to sometimes say you don't know the answer to things. But yeah, it depends on who's being asked. And in general, there are kind of people who are kind of designated the people who do the interviews, and it's not really spread widely across NOAA. So it's something I wish NOAA encouraged more of and did some more training of.
It's wild to me, too, that there are people who are perhaps not camera comfortable or media prepped and don't want to do that, who are being put in front of the camera. But then there's people like Tracy who were held back from being in front of the camera and talking about these things. Because Tracy, I feel like even if it was out of your field of expertise, you would still be a good communicator in something.
Yeah.
If given a press release, you would be able to answer all the questions.
It's like they didn't want to be on camera, but they also didn't want you to talk about their work. And it was the hardest thing because you want to help. And when it comes down to where the administration is making cuts to employees, that's where the public can help you. Even if you're trying to get more funding for a mission, for more data collection, for more models, whatever it is, having the public have a voice for what you're doing and knowing how important it is powerful. And why wouldn't someone want that? Why wouldn't you want that power? I understand that it puts you in a place where people can criticize what you're doing. Fisheries doesn't have it easy because they're regulatory, right? They don't have it easy. But at the same time, it's like, we're doing all this modeling, and yes, for example, for the modeling, it's to meet a mission, like it's ports, it's navigation, like super important stuff. But it's also all of these other things that people could use, going to the beach every day, going outside their door every day, and they just don't even know that it's there. They don't even know where to get the information. Like, we had a hurricane coming, we have great surge visualizations, and they didn't know where to get that information, to protect themselves and figure out if they need to put things up, evacuate. It's really important information. And if we are not communicating these things, then we're doing everybody a disservice.
So what's the answer? How do you think the best way to get that information to the public is?
I think that we just need to put more effort into communication. Like, I really think that the things that Tom was doing with the cartoon, that's great, but getting that in front of people, putting that on YouTube and actually promoting it, or having their employees promote it, like actually saying, hey guys, can you promote this? You know what I mean? And it's not that everybody at an agency or every scientist is even on social media, but the ones that are, even if you're reaching just 5 people, just your immediate family, that can have a domino effect of communication and education. So, like, to me, I think that the change that needs to happen is the scientist's view on communication as seen as just as important as the science, seen as just as important as the data collection is the communication of those data.
Yeah, I mean, it's proven itself with hurricane forecasting.
Right.
As good as it's gotten, as amazing and accurate as it is, it's no good if people aren't getting the information. And like Hurricane Helene, you've got whole communities that did not get the information. And that's, like you said, it's half, if not more, of the battle.
Right.
Tom, any thoughts on best practices for getting that information to the public?
Yeah, and one thing about going back to the NOAA aspect is that when I started communicating at NOAA and becoming a spokesperson, I was a nobody at NOAA. I was a contractor who's just in a little wing of NOAA. And I just like doing communication work. And just the way that things like happened to path, I got on this weird path to where I ended up. And one thing that in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, if I did that, there are probably some excellent science communicators out there that just haven't gotten the opportunity within NOAA to shine because of the way we communicate or the way we funnel interviews to people. It only goes to this person who doesn't even like it to begin with, but he has to do it because he's of a certain rank, and that's how it goes. And that person who's really, really good never gets a chance to shine and never gets a chance to show NOAA that they're good and that they can promote things. And that really hinders our ability to be able to communicate because we have people with these skills. We're just not highlighting them or like nurturing them to basically show the interest in them to basically allow them to communicate better. I feel like that's also like one thing that can help us communicate better as well, is not having robotic interviews or not having people who seem like it is no difference between you or having like AI read out words. Like there's no emotion behind them. I think it's important to have a wider range of people who are speaking about a topic, but also basically be able to communicate this in a way that is understandable to people who are trying to make a decision and not come across necessarily as some sciencey over sciencey sort of languagey word nerdy person. It's important to kind of come across as like, especially when it comes to severe weather or things that could really impact people, you want to come across as a trustworthy person. And I feel like sometimes we think trustworthy means we have to like up the science, when a lot of times trustworthy just means authentic. It just means the person you're speaking to thinks that they can imagine you as the friend they got a drink with or something like that. And they'll trust that person over you just using a 3-syllable word that means like isodrototherm, like doesn't mean anything to anybody, right? So I feel like being able to connect with people, especially when giving our watches and warnings and rip current forecasts, storm surge, all these things, connecting with these people in an authentic way, I think will have people remember what you say better than just kind of, thinking it's a lecture from back in high school that you hated listening to the first time.
You know what I found interesting? A couple things I've noticed over the past month is people who work for NOAA coming out of the woodwork. Maybe I didn't even know they worked for NOAA, and all of a sudden on Facebook or in their communities are talking about how they do. Like it's suddenly getting this promotion. It, maybe a little too late, and then the other thing I've noticed is maybe in the past 2 weeks, real bump up in social media posts from different parts of NOAA. So like the National Weather Service, putting out lots of like, hey, tornado outbreak coming. Here's like 5 great ways, like really bumping up a social media presence. Have you noticed that too, or is that just my imagination?
It's gotten way better. I mean, it was pretty, and there's still a lot of room to grow, but I mean, you cannot make a post out of a poster. You know what I mean? Like that's my pet. Like you cannot read that on a phone. Like that is not doing anything. And even like just putting a picture. I mean, here's the thing. Some of the satellite visualizations, they can get away with this stuff because you don't want to ruin the picture by putting words on there. But in general, if you have a message that is only in the caption, I mean, people are just going to keep on scrolling. Like, you got to do better than that too. But in the past, I agree with you. Like, people have really been bumping up, and the really hopeful post was at first like they were like seeing what they did. No one knows about the offices of NOAA. They don't know that.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
We're supposed to have these regional associations that are boots on the ground, and on the ground doesn't know about the regional associations. Like, we just have to do so much better.
I work within the weather community, and I still don't know a lot about NOAA, and that's kind of alarming. And I find the whole makeup a little confusing at times. There are parts of it that I still don't fully understand what products come out of where. And I've been doing this for, more than 20 years. I should have a little bit of a clue at this point, but it is very confusing for me. So I can imagine for just a regular person not involved in the community, it's got to be incredibly difficult. Tom, curious about this cartoon. Where is it now? Is there any did you get to take this with you, or does this still belong to NOAA? What is happening with Teak and Tom?
It still belongs to NOAA and it's still up.
Yay.
But we finally got it up on YouTube. So it's available for now, and the National Science Teachers Association conference is coming up this week. I was going to go to it until what happened, but I do know there will be some folks there talking about it, and there is a workshop actually with teachers. There's 2 lesson plans for every single episode. walking through those with teachers and going through what it all means and getting feedback as we continue to kind of think about it. But it is Noah's thing, even though it's my face and a cleaned up version of me as a cartoon character. But it's something that it was such a fun thing to do. It's kind of living out a dream. I always joke. People told me I was a cartoon character for years, and I finally became one. So that was great. But yeah, I think that the fun thing with that is, Ocean Today Studio does a lot of really great videos, and they had this brand new studio that came that probably right before COVID hit. They had this new studio that they had put up in the Silver Spring office and in the NOAA buildings, and we finally had a chance to kind of try it out. And I kept pushing them, let's try things out. Let's try things a little bit outside the norm of what normally comes from NOAA. I always joke, like, you can imagine a video from NOAA. It's going to be, close your eyes, it's a wave crashing over a rock bridge and a seagull flying, and then maybe some flooding somewhere. It's like, everyone has seen these videos before. Let's think of different ways to communicate this sort of information that might connect with people more. And I think that the cartoon series is one kind of push in that direction, but I was hoping that, they take that and they keep kind of exploring different ways of connecting with the audience. And I think that might be a way really kind of setting NOAA apart from other government communication styles. We may not have as many resources as NOAA, but maybe we can, as NASA, but we can maybe, with their creativity, be able to push in places that no one else has gone yet in the government.
Yeah, two kind of avenues of communication I think tend to be useful. Or you mentioned the teachers, National Science Teachers Association is one, and then the broadcast meteorologist being the other. I feel like those are two kind of good ways that NOAA's been able to get information out there. And so I'm curious if you've heard any success in that route, or if there's any other kind of ambassadors like that you can think of to get that information out.
Again, broadcast meteorologists are great. I mean, they've always been a really good connection. Teachers have been really, really useful as well. And there's a broader community now with, weather. I feel like weather communication has been going on for a bajillion years. I feel like it's really well established. I feel like climate communication has been developing over time. And I feel like nowadays there's a burgeoning climate communication world that is connected to not nonprofits especially, but also influencers too. And they're really interested in sort of this idea of communicating climate, but also they're trying to put new things out to their followers as well. And I'll be honest, I'm an elder millennial. I'm now struggling with new social media. I'm struggling. I try. It's tough. So if I could have an influencer promote things better than I could, by all means, have fun. So I don't have to learn a new level of things. But I think there's just different avenues too. It's ever changing. I can't. My brain doesn't work like that anymore. But no, it's neat now that with everything in communication, there's so many avenues that you can communicate, whether it's through the written word or video and long form, short form on different platforms, that if you're not trying things out, I mean, now's the time to try things out on different platforms.
Tracy, you're trying things out. What has worked? What platforms are most successful? Who are you connecting with on what platforms? Because I know you're on all of them. So give us some advice here.
Yeah, but when you have a full-time job, social media is really hard. And that's why, it's so hard, because you see these people that aren't practicing scientists doing science communication, and you're like, where are the scientists? But then you look at the scientists and they don't have the time to do the science communication, because I try to do both. But the thing is, we all have to do a little bit so that no one feels the weight of the world on them when they're trying to do both. So for me, I really like Instagram. I only like Instagram because I'm comfortable with Instagram. I haven't really done much YouTube. I had a kids show that I was co-hosting. So that stuff, I put those videos up for my friends' kids. And so I have to relaunch that if I'm going to now focus on my own thing. And then I hear the TikTok's great. I just put up a page so I would save my name so no one took it. So I really haven't done much with TikTok. And then Facebook, I have someone else run my scientist page on Facebook for me. But apparently Facebook is a really untapped, it's not something, I shouldn't say untapped, because a lot of people are tapping into it and doing really well. But yeah, so I'm not an expert. The only reason why I have a follower count is because of TV. But hopefully.
That's true. I think you have consistency. I think every time
Really?
I open my Instagram, I see a new story from you. So I think you're there, you're ever present, and you're never disappearing for long periods of time. So I think consistency is a huge part of it, a trusted face and voice that people know, addressing what's going on.
Yeah, consistency is the most important thing. And with stories, you're right. I've been consistent. But that's like, you're not growing your followers that way
Mm,
because it's only your people that are seeing that, the people
gotcha.
that follow you. It's the posts that I haven't been consistent with. And that's, now in my new chapter, hopefully I can figure out a format that works.
And then YouTube's the opposite, right? Like you're reaching not people outside of your subscribers with the shorts, and then you draw them in, and then they see your posts.
Yeah,
Does anybody
apparently.
know anything about YouTube?
So that's what I've heard. I've heard
Yeah.
shorts is the way
Yeah.
to get them into your
It's a
actual
lot
account.
of elder millennials speculating here.
The kids these days, I hear. Well, I have two little kids. I have a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. Part of the reason why I can't do social media as much anymore because they don't let me. But it's one thing I've seen as they've kind of go through YouTube and YouTube Kids is, geez, do they like shorts?
Yes.
And they
Yep.
love those things.
They do.
And that's how they get to know these people. And then they'd be like, oh, can I follow this account? And that's the way they get into the longer form videos, is just through seeing these bajillion shorts that they watch in 15 seconds at a time.
It's alarming when you see your kid going through them. We don't really let our kids watch YouTube, but I have seen, like my son going through, because he loves all the like all the people, Tracy, like all the science YouTubers. He's like big Mark Rober fan, Nick Uhas, like he loves all these people on YouTube, and just he's like they're blowing stuff up, and they get drawn in through the shorts, and then they just one right after the other swiping through. But yeah, it's
I
a
love
whole
that you
world I'm not
mentioned
familiar
Nick.
with. I've interviewed Nick before. He's super nice.
He's awesome. I think I'm going to see him this week at the National STEM Fair or STEM Fest in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's another way that communication is happening. Festivals, conferences, stuff coming out of this. Are these successful in getting people to understand what's going on in the science world?
I mean, I think that it's really good for workforce development. The festivals, this is like a science fair. It's a national science fair for kids. And when the kids feel empowered and like they're doing something important and adults are listening to them, they're going to keep on that path. The best way that you can nurture a kid to be what the kid wants to be is tell the kid that they're really good at it. And that's what these science fairs do, is and it helps them with communication too. Like, I really think that the next wave of scientists are going to be much different than our generation was.
Okay, so I want you both to tell me what you think NOAA does well when it comes to communication, or with anything. What are they doing really well at?
I think that the biggest thing is that they're really accurate, but almost too, like, and you can trust them. It's always accurate. You don't know where to get the information, but when you find it, it's accurate. And the thing is, like, the only problem with that is that they wait. They wait. When you have a crisis, you need to communicate right away, or some influencer is going to come in that knows no idea what's going on, and they're going to want the clicks. So I think that what NOAA does well is they're right. They're as right as possible.
They're like the oldest child, in
Yeah.
birth order, where they're like a perfectionist. And they
Yes.
need the influence of like a little sibling to kind of make them step outside the mold a little bit there.
Yes, that's a really good way to say it.
I'm the youngest child, so I feel that a little bit.
You're
I would
rogue.
say it's the passion. It's like, even if they don't want to communicate, these folks, they love what they do. I mean, they love what they do. And like, if you want to trust somebody, it kind of goes into trust. Like, these people, this is all they've wanted to do, is work for NOAA, doing the thing that they're doing now. Like, these are the exact people who you want in these positions, because they may not want to do an interview, but geez, they will happily spend 48 hours looking at a radar during a severe weather outbreak, and it'd be like the best day. They will sleep on cots inside weather forecasts. They don't care. They're so excited to be able to forecast and to help people, or to be able to study the ocean, to deal with oil spills, like, you name it, like, whatever it is. Like, this is like the big leagues, and like, just the passion that the folks at NOAA have. And you kind of see it, but like, it's funny, like, it doesn't wane. Like, every generation kind of comes in. Yeah, they may have different skill sets, but like, you don't really see it waning. Like, I know people worked at NOAA for like 30, 40 years, and yeah, they might become a little sometimes stuck in their ways, but they still really like what they do.
It says something if
And
they've been there that long
it
too.
says so, exactly, exactly. It does say something, and like there is a lot of NOAA pride in working for NOAA and trying to do the best because they just want to help people.
Okay, what's next for you guys? Tom, what's next for you? What are your goals moving forward?
Well, I got to pick up the kids later today from aftercare. Make
You're
sure they
living
keep
your
growing
best
and doing their
stay-at-home
homework.
dad.
With stay-at-home dad for the time being. Yeah, what I'm thinking about now that I have a little bit of time on my hand, is actually thinking a bit more strategic in the sort of communication activities I actually want to get involved in. Usually I was involved a lot for work, which is kind of within the confines of what NOAA does. And now I'm not necessarily, depending on how things go, I have a little bit more flexibility to kind of decide how I want my communication style to kind of change, whether that's podcasting, YouTube, video, whatever it may be. So in the near term, my goals are to actually stop and think about it for a little bit because I have a little bit of time. And meanwhile, just kind of continue to be involved in the community and speaking up for things and people. But yeah, I'm actually looking forward to a little bit of time to think.
Awesome. Tracy, what's next for you?
I am really focusing in on my mission, Inspector Planet, and creating something from that. So I've always wanted it to be like this fleet of mobile labs with that engage the public in citizen science, and having this basically this camp that's kind of like I don't want to say Boy Scouts for girls because I know that girls are allowed in Scouts, but I think that there's a special place for girls to do things with girls. And I kind of and I would probably extend that to boys too, but basically, living off the land, like understanding survivor and like weather stuff through learning how to clean water and how to detect soils and trees and what you can eat in the wild. Like all of that connects people to nature and they feel like badasses because they're, doing a survivor camp, but that's kind of where eventually I want to be, starting out with a lot of building on the communication, expanding on the camps that I do for kids right now. And I'm starting a podcast. What's going to kill you today, I think, is going to be the name of it.
Nice.
Sounds very uplifting.
Yeah, yeah. It is. There's always in the tagline is in how you survive. But there's always a new chemical in the water. There's, extreme weather. There's always something. You hear every day something new is going to kill you, right? And so that's kind of where I'm going with that. But like in my 3 pillars, I have education, communication, and innovation. And Tom, like some of the stuff that you did with Teak and Tom, like I think can really, your experience, like I'd love to work with you on something that we can actually make our own moving forward and help NOAA have a better platform or a bigger platform by reaching further than they have before.
Cool. I'm in. Sounds
Okay.
good.
So then I'll have you both back on my podcast to talk about this when you've collaborated. Is there anything else either one of you wants to throw in here before we go about communication and the sciences in NOAA?
I think we
I
just
guess
better.
it could be better. And one thing I always believe, I don't believe every scientist necessarily should communicate. I believe every scientist should be trained in how to communicate, just so they know how. But it doesn't mean that everyone should, because I think but there's an importance, I feel like, for teaching scientists the ways of communication, because I think that will then filter down into the way they write articles, the way they talk about that within their work groups, and I think it'll help actually improve the way that they inevitably do science. There's no such thing and now as like that one person who goes into like a hole and comes out with a seminal paper 15 months later. Like no, it's like science is done in teams. So teaching scientists and training scientists and how to communicate is only going to help to create better science. And then you might also find some people who come out and realize that science communication is the thing they want to do. So I feel like it's a benefit. So I just wish we had a more cohesive and like thorough science communication training that's necessary for folks at NOAA. And I think it'll just lead to just better things across the board.
I agree completely. Communication needs to be something that we're taught, or and I really think that NOAA specifically would really benefit whenever there's a crisis, whenever there's something coming up, make like a talking points that are readable and consumable and put them out there. So then if there are communicators, if there are influencers, they have the correct information, and it's in a way that the public just trying to find information can read and understand. Like these forecasts, the forecast guidance and the pages on, you're like, where is the information?
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just like you can't find it. And I think that we would really benefit. I think the communication staff would really benefit from it too, if scientists really practiced writing down and foresaw things coming. You know, we're gonna get a sarcasm bloom this year. We're gonna get a red tide bloom. You know what I mean? Like, before it happens, start making your talking points and then add the ones that are specific to the event and have them readily added. And I know that the web developers can add things and remove things quickly, because like the hour that I was no longer an employee, my name was removed from the website. So I know that we have the capacity to constantly update the websites. And I think that we focus that on talking points.
And we're giving scientists a lot of slack here, but I also want to point out that I've run into major roadblocks when it comes to the public affairs people too, who aren't scientists. And there's some disconnect between those two fields, I think, because a lot of times when I've dealt directly with the scientists and gone straight to them for the interview, it's actually gone great. And they haven't felt scripted. They've just spoken from what, they know. And then it's my job to make it understandable to the public, right? Because I'm the interviewer. But sometimes public affairs comes in and they're like, well, stick to these talking points and we'd like to highlight this and don't talk about this. And then the scientist is now uncomfortable because they feel like they do have to be on a script. Whereas if you just left them to their own devices, sometimes it is gold.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. I mean, I think that everything that I've kind of said, it hasn't been geared just towards scientists, just the whole group. But you're exactly right. And I think there's something to having really good leadership that promotes leadership that are good communicators, like leaders that read from a script. It's like my pet peeve. Like, I want, like, Steve Thur at NOAA is like, he was my scientist that was a communicator role model. You know what I mean? And then when I'm talking about passionate talks, Ken Graham gave a passionate talk. I don't know how he is with leadership otherwise, but he is a fantastic, like, he made me want to switch over to the weather service. A lot like Tom was doing earlier, actually, when you were talking about passion. I was like, that's the thing. That's what we need to come out. That's what we need to reach the public with. And I think that credit is the other thing that is really important to scientists that is overlooked. You know, you're in this civil servant role where you're not supposed to care about credit. It's about the public good, right? It's about the greater good. But the truth is, on an individual basis, a scientist wants credit. And a lot of those obstacles with communicating someone else's science that doesn't want to communicate their science was because they were worried about credit, because they're not getting enough credit where they are right now. And I think that is something, I think giving credit to people will make our communication strategy a lot better. And I know that sounds like a weird, indirect relationship, but in my experience in leadership at NOAA, that's what I found to be the most effective way to get people to start talking to each other, to get people to actually communicate on a regular basis, is by giving them credit and telling them what a great job they're doing.
Yeah, and I know AMS is working to kind of improve that as well, the communication factor, and trying to create a new task force that's going to improve that. So they're doing some good things as well.
Before you leave, I want to say one thing that I got to give a shout out to data visualizers. We're talking a lot about, I'm bad at data visualizing, so I'm talking about what I know, which is more like using the words out of my mouth. But I mean, the reason why the ENSO blog, for instance, on climate.gov is like shockingly beloved. I don't think when we created it that we thought it was going to be as loved as it became, but it is shockingly popular. It's still in my brain. But a lot of it's because the images that we use for that are so well done, because we actually have thought an actual investment in people who know how to make data visualizations. It's not like relying on, let's say, a scientist who wrote the article, did the research to also then create the images in a way that we've all seen journal articles, and sometimes the images are a mess. By sometimes, I mean all the time. And I feel like that's what climate.gov does really, really well. So they did a ton of focus on the visuals. And that was the whole thing. Like, we weren't going to write an article when I was writing for climate.gov that didn't have a visual that could tell a story, or a visual that could live by itself. And, I feel like those are the things that also, like, yes, my funny quips in my article might be fun for the first time someone reads it, but the image in that, I've seen the image that I've written in an Enso blog post be in Wikipedia, be shared year after year after year with a NOAA logo on the bottom corner of it over and over again. I feel like that is such an effective way of communicating, but also branding NOAA is by taking the time to visualize something well. And I don't think there's a ton of investment across NOAA specifically on the data visualizers, because I know when I was there, I remember OAR was they had like they were getting a new visualizer, but like OAR is huge, and like you want to have multiple people in lots of different labs and across the weather center and whatnot to be able to like take the information that came out, talk to the scientists, and create a really good image for it, which then lasts forever. And I do think that is a super useful way that we don't talk enough about.
That makes me think of like Sierra satellite imagery too. I think they do an amazing job of showing really pretty pictures and then saying, this is what this is, or this is what these storms looked like, or this is what this is. So I love their way of translating science communications as well. It's interesting. Visuals are everything.
Like what Tom just said, does transfer over to social media. Like that's where we need to invest. And then on top of it, even with, like I gave this talk on modeling and workforce development. We really do not only have to translate and communicate our science, but also grow our workforce. Like it was really tough for us to even hire modelers at some points. And, like as far as the data visualization goes, my big thing was there was no user interface. There was a black screen. So you're having oceanographers that fell in love with the ocean by being on the ocean, or marine biologists, and then you're putting them in front of a black screen and saying, go, find your passion. And so like the visualizations for the public are important, but also for the scientists, having those user interfaces to like grow the workforce, to get kids doing modeling, like for the unified forecast system, which hopefully will be crowdsourced at one point, but there's a lot to be said for that data visualization, those people that can do it, because I'm not one of those people either. And I think it's so impressive.
Tracy Fanara, Tom Liberto, thank you so much for coming on today to discuss this. I think you guys had some amazing points. Love getting some insider information, and wish you both the best in the future. I think you're going to do awesome things, and I can't wait to hear all about it.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Thank you.